Is going to cover solving quadratic equations, which you've been doing a lot of, but we're going to be using it solving with the quadratic formula, which goes to the tune of Pop Goes the Weasel. So there's actually a video above this section on the choice board that I want you to watch, because you are going to have to sing that song with me in order to finish this section. Now, to solve these problems, once again, I want to make sure that we are clear of the solutions to a quadratic equation are always called the zeros. And we call them the zeros because we want to know where the equation is equal to 0, or more specifically, we're looking for the x-intercept of our quadratic equation. So even though we're learning a new method, we are still solving the same problems, and we are looking for the same answer. So when we're looking at a polynomial, we're frequently writing it in this form, ax squared plus bx plus c. And we need to know the a, the b, and the c values. And we use them a lot, looking for vertex and things like that. But they're also really helpful when we're using the quadratic formula, which is written like this. And if you learned the song, it's already popping into your head, x is equal to opposite. Okay, so as we solve an equation that looks like this, 6x squared plus 6x minus 12 is equal to 0, in order to use the quadratic formula, we need to find the a, the b, and the c values. The a value is what is in front of the squared term, more specifically x squared. In this case, our a value is 6. The b value is the coefficient of the x by itself, which would also be 6 in this situation. And then finally, the c value is the lone coefficient on its own, which in this case is negative 12. Once we found a, b, and c, all we have to do is plug them into the quadratic formula, and we should get our zeros. So let's see what that looks like. Since we're looking for the answer as an x, we always leave x equals at the beginning of the quadratic formula. Opposite of b, our b is 6, so I put negative 6 plus or minus the square root of b squared. Well, that would be 6 squared, or 36, minus 4 times a, which is 6, times c, which is negative 12. And it's really important to have a couple negatives under here, because if we create a negative square root under here, we've actually made a big mistake most of the time. 2 times a is 2 times 6. Now let's simplify and see what this looks like. X equals negative 6 plus or minus 36 minus 4 times 6 times 12. If we positive from the two negatives here, that would be 24 times 12, which ends up being 8, 4, 288. So this will be plus 288. And all of that is over 12. And now we've plugged it into the quadratic equation, or the quadratic formula, and now we just have to simplify our answer from here. And now I put this on a new slide just to give us some room. Now, before we knew that this here is equal to 288, so I'm going to get x is equal to negative 6 plus or minus 36 plus 288 is 324, and all of this is over 12. Okay? But 324 is the square root of 18. It is a rational number. And we are ready to do the last step. But right here is the very important part. We see plus or minus, which means we have to have two different solutions most of the time. Now, we can have the same solution twice, but this means we have to have two solutions. So if you come up to me right now and say the plus or minus means we usually have two solutions, you'll get 5 SPs. So our solution on the left is going to be looking at the plus part of this equation. And I probably need a pen for this to work. So that's going to be negative 6 plus 18 all over 12. and this is x equals whatever this equals here. Negative 6 plus 18 is positive 12. 12 divided by 12 is x is equal to 1. Our problem on the right is going to look at the negative part of our solution. So x is equal to negative 6 minus 18 all over 12, which is negative 24 over 12, or x is equal to negative 2. And so if we graphed our quadratic equation on Desmos, we should get our zeros to be negative 1 and negative 2. And if I do that, I get negative 2 here and positive 1 over here, which match our equation. So we have gotten the right answer using the quadratic formula. So let's do one more here. We have 5x squared plus 9x equals negative 4. Before I start, I notice that my right side of my equation is not equal to 0. So I need to add 4 to both sides in order for my right side to be equal to 0, because one of our sides has to be equal to 0 in order to use any of the methods we've learned in this unit so far. Equal to 0. So now we are ready to find the a, the b, and the c values to help us solve. A has to be positive 5, b has to be positive 9, and c has to be positive 4. And now we need to know the quadratic formula. So I'm hoping the song pops in your head a little bit right now. So we have x is equal to opposite b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. And if you're a little bit worried about the singing part of it when you have to do that with me, you can simply say it in rhythm like I did right there, and that would count as good enough. Now I have to plug in my a, my b, and my c values to try to solve my quadratic formula. So x is equal to opposite b, which is negative 9, plus or minus the square root of b squared, which is 81, minus 4 times a times c all over 2a, which is, 5. So let's simplify. X is equal to negative 9 plus or minus. Okay, so 4 times 5 is 20. 20 times 4 is 80. So this becomes 81 minus 80. So I get the square root of 1 all over 10. The square root of 1 is just 1. And now I am ready to do my two solutions. So we're going to do the positive number here on the left. So we get x is equal to negative 9 plus 1 all over 10. This is negative 8 on the top. Negative 8 tenths simplifies to negative 4 fifths. So there's my fraction answer. The decimal answer would be negative 8 tenths. The right one will do our negative solution. So x is equal to negative 9 minus 1 all over 10. So I get x is equal to negative 10 over 10, which is negative 1. And if I've done this correctly, when I graph it on Desmos, my x-intercepts are going to be negative 4 fifths and negative 1. So let's see if we did it right. So here's our graph. And we got it spread out. So let's zoom in. Makes it a little bit easier to see. So our negative 1 is right there. That part looks good. And negative 8 tenths, which is the same as negative 4 fifths, which means that we must have done this correctly. Once again, if you have any questions, please let me know. But I will tell you that watching the retake video will once again count for 5 extra SPs, regardless on if you have to or not.